This is going to be my first look at the Sony A7RV. Who is it for? I think there's two categories of people. There's probably more, but two seem really obvious to me. And the first one is professional photographers like myself, who for them this camera is going to make their life easier. They're going to take advantage of its features, which we're going to get into in a minute as well. And it's going to make their job easier. They're going to have an easier time doing their work, so it's right for them. The other category of people is people that just want it. They like having the latest technology. And I should be clear in this video, no one needs this camera and I don't need it, but it does make my life easier. I should also state, I haven't settled on the Sony system. I've only got a couple of lenses for it. And I'm still testing it out alongside my regular gear to see if it's a system that I then want to further invest into. But let's start talking about the camera now. We need to address the megapixel count as the first issue, because I didn't buy this camera because of its megapixel count. In fact, I would say it was the only feature I simply didn't care about, because people massively overstate how important megapixels are, because camera companies love to teach you that megapixels matter, and then they can sell you a new camera because you're going to be able to count all the leaves and blades of grass in your photos. Like, anyone gives a damn about any of that. The only thing people care about in your work is, does it create a mood and atmosphere that makes them feel something? Do they care about it? Is it interesting? Does it catch their attention? There are certain categories of photographers, not landscape photographers, who need high megapixels, and they fall into the commercial umbrella. That's where I fall in as well. I don't really need high megapixels for the kind of work that I do, or at least let's say it's very rare. So a camera like this, for me, is bought regardless of the megapixel count. When you're looking at cameras, my question for you is this: how much more money are you going to make from having a higher megapixel camera? Put a figure on it. But how many more prints do you think you're going to sell from having a higher megapixel camera? Put a figure on it. It's not going to happen. Right? People don't buy things because of the megapixel count of cameras. Having said that, it's nice to have for certain things, and that's going to bring me into one of the first features that I really like about this camera, and it's that Sony has implemented a system by which you can shoot at different megapixel counts, and it can shoot at 15 megapixels, 28 megapixels, and 61 megapixels. The camera also shoots these as lossless compressed RAW files, so it reduces the file size. The reason I got it was for everything else, not just the megapixel count. Let's talk about the control layout on this camera. So the control layout is really a good mashup between a Canon system and a Nikon system, but it reminds me very much of Nikon with a little bit of Canon. Let me show you what I mean. So the control layout that we have is we've got a wheel on the front, like a Nikon, and a wheel on the back, like a Nikon, and the on-off switch on the shutter button, the same as Nikon has. On the back, we also have a Canon-style wheel, scroll wheel. This is also pressable, so you can program these to do pretty much anything, and you have a pressable center button as well. In addition to that, what Sony has added, which I really like, is another wheel here, and you can program this to do a whole bunch of things as well, and you can lock it. So we have 4 control wheels on the camera. And so the way I have it set up is I have aperture at the front, I have shutter speed here at the back, ISO here, which is lockable, and this one is set to white balance when I turn it. And when you put the camera into Kelvin white balance, once you do that and you set the back wheel to adjust white balance, you can change your white balance manually here. And I like doing that because you get a nice preview of it, but I don't do it all the time. This control layout, just for the basic controls, is really nice. It's very intuitive, and I can do it without thinking. And I love that I can adjust the ISO and all of these controls without having to press any buttons to enter those modes. I also like the little selector switch to switch between photo and video. That's really good. But the record button on here will record video whenever you want to. So you can be shooting in manual mode, hit the record button on the top here, and it will just start recording with whatever settings you've got in the camera. It's not going to shift over to some other mode, which I think is important. If you just want to grab shots and you're not bothered about sticking to shutter angles and so on, you can just get on with it and shoot. Let's talk about the grip, because the grip's important, right? And it's very important, actually. I'm a 6 foot and I have reasonably large hands. If there's a tipping point on a scale between big enough and not big enough, this just tips in just as big enough, but only just. So the point I want to make to you is that when I'm holding it like this, my little finger is on the grip. It's just, but it is actually on, but it is only just. Having said that, the fact is it's on, so it's working for me, and that's okay. The thing to understand with it is that when you're holding your camera, I think the mistake a lot of people make is they kind of hold like this, and so this hand's doing 90% of the work. It shouldn't be like that. You should be holding the camera more with your left and a little bit looser with your right. I wish that the grip was 1/2 centimetre deeper. I think 1/2 centimetre even would make such a difference. It would just make the whole thing a little bit easier to manage for me. That's going to vary from person to person, but there is a solution. I bought this grip from Small Rig, like this, and it's designed to fit this camera. So you can see how that fits on. It fits essentially flush with it, and now you have a bigger grip. Obviously it increases the weight slightly, but you also get an Arca Swiss plate at the bottom for mounting to things. It's also going to protect your camera a bit when you're putting it down on things. The problem I think with the grip is that it's just not the most ergonomic shape at the bottom. I think it would be really great if Sony could come up with their own. But let's be real about what this amounts to. I'm going to bring in the overall size of the camera and the system into this, because this is going to be a question for you about, do the positives outweigh the negatives? If you travel a lot and move around a lot with a camera, having a very small system like this is really beneficial. This is a very small camera body. It fits in my hand like that. If you want to do things like put this onto a strap on a bag, if you want to carry a smaller camera bag, like a shoulder carry bag, if you want to get more gear into your backpack, having a smaller system is really beneficial. Sony is making lightweight full frame lenses that are good quality. And so you have to understand that the Sony system is geared towards lightweight. Their 70-200 2.8 is only 1 kilogram, which is about 2.2 pounds. They're making lightweight gear. You have to remember that you're not putting on a 70-200 from a DSLR that weighs over 3 pounds or 1.5 kilos. They have a good range of 1.4 primes. The 1.2s aren't even that big. So you have this range of lenses where they're gearing it towards being small. And I appreciate that, and also understand that that comes with some limitations when it comes to grip. Now, when we come to the control layout that I showed you earlier, I think, and it's really weird for me to say this, I find this really unusual to say, having had a bit of time with different mirrorless cameras, this might be the most logical control layout in the mirrorless system right now. In terms of pure practicality, I don't know if it's the most fun, Fuji's probably got that. But in terms of just being practical, this is probably it because of the dedicated dials. I'm not having to button press to move things. Like even small things like not button pressing to change the ISO, not button pressing to control manual white balance. That for me gets me back to simplicity, which is what I felt Sony lacked before when I was with Sony previously. For instance, let me show you one of the custom changes that I've made. This is aperture priority with auto ISO. I've programmed this button so I can flick through my minimum shutter speeds in aperture priority, and then I can just carry on shooting. So I like having that there so I can just quickly change my minimum shutter speed and then shoot. Another thing I've done with it is I decluttered the display. You see there's not much there, and the only options I have, when I press the up button here, all I do is turn the histogram on and off. That's the only display options I have. I got rid of everything else because I wanted to simplify the camera, I wanted to make it basic. But I believe the control layout that we've got, when you combine all the button placements, all the customizable buttons, the control wheels, having 4 of them, and then having the switch at the top to change between video and photo mode, where you can then program a totally different setup in the video mode, it's simple. It really, really makes it simple. So if you don't do any video, you can leave this in photo mode and reprogram that record button on top to be something else and just shoot photos. And I think you'll probably have a really good time with it. You can simplify the camera down, especially for photography, to the point where once you've set it up, you probably don't ever need to go into the menu system again, maybe other than to format a card. That might be it. The screen on the back now looks like a decent, good resolution screen. But I do, because I use the screen on the back a lot, I really appreciate that. As you'll probably know, it's a tilt and flip screen. For me, this is a really big deal because I do video myself to make videos for YouTube, and I'd also prefer just having the tilt screen for when I'm doing photos. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a game changer, but it's pretty close to it. I think it's a really big step forward. I know previous cameras have had things like this, and Panasonic and Sony themselves as well, but it's really nice to see them bring it to the A7 line like this, and I think the implementation of it is good. It feels very solid and it works. You don't have to fight to get it to tilt, you just pull and it works. And if you just want to flip it, it just flips out. Nice and simple. Let's talk about the viewfinder, because for me the viewfinder's a little bit of a mixed bag. So Sony says it's 9.44 million dots or whatever. Here's the thing, I think you have to sort of not pay too much attention to it being 9.44 million dots. So I had the Nikon Z7 II, which was nowhere near the level of this camera. I'd say it's 2 to 3 generations behind it in terms of technology, except for the screens. I think the viewfinder, which was a 3.2 million whatever screen, was about the same. I don't think there's much in it. I just feel that it's a nice large, it's clear, it is good, don't get me wrong, it's a really good screen, but if you say it's 9.4 million dots, it has to wow, and it just doesn't wow. I just think it's a good quality screen. I would give it 8 out of 10. Yeah, I think it's a very good screen. It's just not the 10 out of 10 that the 9.4 million dots promises that it will be. The other thing that the viewfinder does is that when you half press the shutter, or when you go into sort of focusing mode, it drops in resolution and becomes a bit grainy. It looks like it goes down to like a 1080p grainy screen slightly. And my feeling on this is that you could have just gone with a 5K screen and got on with it and not had to do all this. We've got 9.4 million dots. It's a bit like you got it, but is it really noticeable? Have you really got it? And if you can't do it whilst you're focusing, then you don't really have it. I think it's one of the things that I'd slightly dislike on the camera. I'm not going to say it's disruptive, but it's bordering on it. It does border on it because you're like, oh, it still keeps getting me like, oh, the resolution's dropped. I'm consciously aware of that often, and I don't really quite like that. I think that for me, I shoot 90% or more off the screen on the back. So again, this doesn't constitute a deal breaker for me. I just don't use it that much. I'd only use it in very bright lighting conditions. And sometimes I just feel like putting the camera up to my eye. But I don't see the point in using I think everyone should do what they want. But I don't care how you use your camera. If you want to use viewfinders all the time, you just do it, because it has no impact on me. But I like to take the camera away from my face so I can see the environment around me. I like to be able to be much more aware and use my peripheral vision and see people that would be entering the shot. For instance, if you're photographing a wedding, if I hold the camera like this, I have full range and understanding of what's going to happen next and who's going to enter the scene. I don't like the tunnel vision of looking down the viewfinder. You might feel completely the opposite, and that's absolutely fine, and you should always just do things the way that's intuitive for you. So for me, this isn't a big deal, but I would say to you this: if you are a viewfinder shooter and you use a viewfinder all the time, you should really be aware that this viewfinder drops in quality when you're focusing. You really need to be aware of that, and that could be a deal breaker for you. Because I think it probably would be for me if I shot with a viewfinder all the time. I'd be, that quality drop is annoying. Like, it's really annoying. Another thing I like is the memory card door doesn't open on its own, Nikon. You have to push it down and slide it out. This doesn't feel the strongest, but it doesn't feel weak either. But the door's a bit thin. I'm sure it's fine, but you know what I mean? It doesn't have that kind of... I think Canon's got this sorted when they do memory card doors, and I think that this is fine, but it just doesn't feel like the most heavy duty. So in the menu system, this is the default page that opens, and you see this home screen. And if I touch and go in, you can see that I get straight into the options to change the RAW file sizes. The menu system has changed on these cameras, and this home screen, I think, is a brilliant idea to just give you all of these options really quickly. Stole it from Canon from the info screen. So now let's talk about the touchscreen on the back. So I'm in a wide area focus mode at the moment, probably a bit too close to the camera for it to really work properly. And I have this button here to stop it tracking people. So this is people tracking on and off. So it won't just latch onto faces. But if I'm using this wide area focus mode and I think, no, I just want to focus on that thing over there, I can just touch on the screen and it will give me a focus point, which I can then move around with the joystick. And if I want to come back to that wide area focus, I can just press it in and we're back to that again. So I can very quickly go between those two focus modes, which is kind of, I guess, normal mirrorless, but it's really nice the way it does it. And I think the joystick on the back of the camera is really good. If we talk about the focus system is excellent. It's very accurate, it's very fast. It does everything it's supposed to do. It has this AI chip stuff, which works. Canon has it too. It's not like something that's revolutionary, I think, at this stage. But all you need to know about the focusing system is that the focusing system is excellent. It's very adaptive and intuitive, and it grabs things like, even if you're shooting from someone from behind, it will see their eye from a really sharp angle, and it understands that what it's looking at is a person, not just a face. It will just works really well, and I think it's one of the big selling points on this camera. Because we need to now talk about the thing that should help you actually decide whether you want to get a camera like this or not. The upside of this camera is all of the functionality. The controls work really well, they're very intuitive. The autofocus system is amazing and works really well. The screen on the back is really adaptable, flexible, blah, blah, blah. It's a very good, very solid mirrorless camera with lots of options. But here's the thing. Image quality hasn't got better for about 10 years. The D800 and the D600 are all going to give you comparable image quality. There aren't any cameras out there that are doing anything groundbreaking with image quality. So manufacturers give us, as they always have done, higher megapixel counts. Everyone's got kind of the same dynamic range. Canon had to catch up a little bit with that, but basically everyone's got similar image quality and outputs. The color from this camera is very good. Now they fixed that, so something Sony had to catch up on. They've caught up on a lot of the fundamental things, but if you had a D800 and you used it, or a D810 for example, and you bought this camera, I don't think that the image quality would make you go, wow, that was worth all the extra money. I just don't think it would, because the image quality on these cameras for every system has just been static for so long. For photography, nothing's getting better. So if you're coming from one of those older cameras, you're not going to see an image quality difference which is going to make you, wow, that was worth the money. You're not going to get it. So why do I think that the Sony system's good? I should state this now. I'm not set on staying in the Sony system yet. I'm still trying it out. I might try out a different system. At some point, I'm going to go all in on one of the mirrorless systems. But I really would like to try and see which system suits me best first before I do that. I really like this system. I think it's good overall. I'm very impressed with it. I think Sony's come a long way in terms of their handling and ergonomics. Really, really long way. I don't really feel that there's that much difference anymore. But what separates these systems now? What's really separating them? It's the lens lineup. I think that's where we see a real shift. So you have to think about what you want to go into. They're allowing the third-party lenses, and there's some really interesting lenses. And we're way past, I think that people are still stuck in the past thinking that third-party manufacturers are just, cheap Chinese copies. That's just not the case. Like, they're making some really good lenses. So now you've got Samyang and Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to 2.8. What sounds bad about that? There's a whole range of different lenses, but the lens selection is comprehensive and it's mostly small, lightweight, and let's say fairly priced compared to the competition. I think they're a little bit cheaper than a lot of other manufacturers are. And the quality thing where other manufacturers are like, this camera brand makes the best glass. That's not true anymore. Those days are gone. I think all of the camera manufacturers are making lenses that are on par with each other. I don't think there's any different. I think all this stuff about mount sizes for the lenses hasn't played out. Everyone's saying, they won't be able to do this and they won't be able to do that. I don't think any of that's played out. For me, when I look, I can see the 35 1.4 from Sony is more affordable than a 35 1.2 would be. It's smaller, it's lightweight. I love that they're doing a 1.4 range of lenses that are smaller and cheaper, and they're also pushing out the 1.2 lenses as well, which are bigger and heavier and a bit more expensive. The zoom lenses are lightweight, they're making them smaller and lighter. Look at the weight of the 24 to 70 2.8 version 2, the new 70 to 200 2.8. These lenses are getting smaller. I guess they're going to do the 16 to 35. So Sony's selling point as a system is lightweight small lenses with no reduction in optical quality. They're more affordable, they're smaller, and they fit in your bag more easily. It's a very tempting system right now, but I'd like to reiterate, you don't need this camera. Cameras like this are for people that are professional photographers like myself, where the autofocusing systems, in particular the autofocusing systems, make life easier, and they need video. That kind of stuff is what I need for work. If you're a hobbyist and you want to enjoy your life, get something like this, a 60 Mark I, and you will have a really nice time, and you will produce images on this that will stand up alongside the images produced on this, not in a technical performance chart rubbish that YouTubers do. Just I'm talking about real world pictures. You can do everything on this. It's just that, obviously the focusing system and things on the Sony is going to be a lot better. That's where it's at, folks. Don't buy it. That's my advice to you. Don't buy it. Unless you really think you need it. Unless it's going to make your life easier at work, or you just really, really want it, I would say don't buy it. So after all that, my advice is don't buy the camera. So come on, subscribe to the channel. If you like that, give me a thumbs up. Drop me a comment. Check out the links in the description. And I will see you again next video. Take care. Bye-bye.